50 Chinese J-20 stealth fighters swarm the USS Gerald R carrier group in the Taiwan Strait. What happens next stuns Beijing and rewrites the rules of Pacific power. October 1st, 2025. The Taiwan Strait, just 110 nautical miles separating democracy from dictatorship. At 6:15 a.m., the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, a $13 billion floating fortress carrying 75 aircraft and 4,500 sailors, began its routine freedom of navigation transit through international waters. Escorting her were 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each bristling with Aegis combat systems and vertical launch cells loaded with SM-6 missiles. Their mission was clear: demonstrate that international law, not Beijing's threats, governs these waters. But China had other plans. At 6:42 a.m., radar operators aboard the Ford detected something unprecedented. 50 contacts, moving fast, climbing high. The People's Liberation Army Air Force had scrambled its entire eastern fleet of J-20 stealth fighters, China's answer to America's F-22 Raptor. Each J-20, valued at approximately $110 million, carried PL-15 long-range air-to-air missiles with a reach exceeding 180 miles. This was no ordinary intercept. This was a show of force designed to humiliate the United States Navy in front of the world. Intelligence later revealed the operation had been planned for weeks. Beijing's objective was audacious: surround the carrier group, achieve radar lock on every American aircraft, force them to turn back, and broadcast the footage as proof that the Taiwan Strait belonged to China. For the Chinese Communist Party, this was to be a propaganda victory worth billions in global influence. The formation was staggering: 50 J-20s arranged in 3 waves, approaching from the north, west, and south. Their radar cross-section, reduced by stealth technology to roughly 1 square meter, made them harder to track than conventional fighters. They flew at 45,000 feet, nearly 9 miles high, using altitude as both shield and advantage. On paper, they outnumbered the Ford's ready combat air patrol by more than 3 to 1. Chinese state media had already prepared the headlines: American carrier forced to retreat. Xi Jinping's iron fist secures Chinese waters. To Beijing, this was checkmate. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed the USS Gerald R. Ford was alone. What would you do if 50 enemy fighters appeared on your radar? Type A in the comments if you'd scramble all aircraft immediately. Type B if you'd maintain defensive posture, and assess. Let's see what the community thinks. At 6:47 a.m., the response began. Not with panic, but with precision. From the Ford's flight deck, the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, a technological marvel capable of hurling 33-ton aircraft from 0 to 165 miles per hour in under 2 seconds, began cycling. Within 90 seconds, 8 F-A-18E Super Hornets were airborne. Each jet, worth $70 million, carried M120D AMRAAM missiles with a range of 100 miles and AIM-9X Sidewinders for close combat. But the real advantage wasn't visible to Chinese radar. 40 miles to the east, hiding in a rain squall, the USS Ronald Reagan, another American supercarrier, had been shadowing the Ford for 12 hours. Beijing's intelligence had missed it completely. At 6:49 a.m., Reagan launched 12 more Super Hornets. The trap was set. Simultaneously, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, an airborne early warning aircraft orbiting at 25,000 feet, began coordinating the response. Its AN/APY-9 radar could track over 2,000 targets simultaneously and see 340 miles in every direction. Every Chinese J-20, despite its stealth coating, was now painted on American screens. The Hawkeye's data link fed targeting information directly to the F-A-18s, the destroyers below, and command centers as far away as Pearl Harbor. The Chinese believed they had achieved surprise. In reality, they had flown into a carefully monitored kill box. The Chinese formation tightened. At 6:52 a.m., lead J-20 pilots began the process of achieving radar lock on American aircraft. This was the moment Beijing wanted captured on film: Chinese fighters dominating American airspace. But at 6:53 a.m., something unexpected happened. The J-20's radar screens erupted with false contacts. Dozens, then hundreds of phantom targets appeared, disappearing, reappearing, overwhelming their systems. The Americans had activated their EA-18G Growlers, electronic warfare aircraft equipped with next-generation jammer pods worth $90 million each. These systems pumped 10 kilowatts of jamming power across multiple frequencies, blinding Chinese radar and severing their data links to ground control. In seconds, the coordinated Chinese formation devolved into confusion. Pilots shouted into radios, receiving only static. Their advanced cockpit displays flickered with conflicting information. If you're finding this tactical breakdown valuable, take a second to hit that subscribe button. We go deeper than anyone else into modern military operations. At 6:55 a.m., the American countermove began. 20 FA-18 Super Hornets, now positioned in a wide arc, began accelerating toward the Chinese formation. They didn't need to get close. At 6:57 a.m., the first volley of M120D missiles launched. 16 white contrails streaked across the dawn sky, each missile guided by the Hawkeye's targeting data. The AIM-120D, traveling at Mach 4, covered the distance in less than 60 seconds. Chinese pilots, their warning systems screaming, attempted evasive maneuvers, but with their situational awareness degraded by jamming, they were reacting to threats they couldn't fully see. The first J-20 exploded at 6:58 a.m., its right wing shearing off as the missile's 50-pound warhead detonated. The pilot ejected, his $110 million fighter tumbling into the sea. 2 more J-20s were hit within seconds, their wreckage carving burning arcs through the sky. Panic rippled through the Chinese formation. Orders were shouted. But without reliable communications, coordination collapsed. Several J-20 pilots broke formation, diving for the relative safety of lower altitude. Others attempted to return fire, launching their PL-15 missiles at extreme range. But the American jets, guided by real-time data from the Hawkeye, simply maneuvered out of the missile engagement zones. The PL-15's sophisticated weapons, in their own right, found nothing but empty sky. At 7:02 a.m., a second wave of American missiles launched. This time, 20 AIM-120Ds targeted the northern group of J-20s. Chinese countermeasures, chaff and flares, bloomed desperately across the sky. Some missiles were decoyed. But not enough. 4 more J-20s were destroyed. Another 2 were damaged, trailing smoke as they limped toward the Chinese coast. In less than 5 minutes, China had lost 7 fighters worth a combined $770 million. On the Ford and Reagan, the mood was controlled intensity. Fighter directors tracked every aircraft, every missile, every move. The destroyers below, their Aegis systems locked on to the remaining Chinese fighters, held fire. They didn't need to engage. The air battle was already won. At 7:06 a.m., the remaining Chinese J-20s received emergency orders. Disengage immediately. Return to base. It was a full retreat, broadcast on frequencies the Americans were monitoring. Chinese pilots, their fuel running low and their formation shattered, turned west. They had come to assert dominance. Instead, they fled, pursued part of the way by American fighters who maintained radar lock until the J-20s crossed into Chinese territorial airspace. By 7:15 a.m., the skies over the Taiwan Strait were clear. The USS Gerald R continued its transit, undeterred, its flight deck recovering aircraft with practiced efficiency. The engagement from first radar contact to Chinese retreat had lasted just 33 minutes. American losses? 0. Not a single aircraft damaged, not a single pilot at risk. Chinese losses? 7 J-20 stealth fighters destroyed, 2 more heavily damaged and unlikely to fly again. 9 pilots recovered from the sea by Chinese rescue helicopters, their faces broadcast on international news. The humiliation Beijing sought to inflict had instead become their own. What would you have done if you were commanding the Chinese formation when the jamming started? Would you press the attack or fall back? Comment your tactical analysis below. The aftermath was swift and global. Within an hour, satellite imagery of burning J-20 wreckage floating in the Taiwan Strait appeared on news networks worldwide. The Chinese Communist Party, which had planned to showcase this operation as proof of their air superiority, instead faced international mockery. Social media exploded with comparisons. 50 versus 20. Stealth versus experience. Propaganda versus reality. The verdict was unanimous. China had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and outclassed. Economically, the impact was immediate. Taiwan's stock market, which had dipped at news of the initial confrontation, surged 8% when the outcome became clear. International shipping through the Taiwan Strait, which had briefly paused, resumed at full capacity. Insurance rates for vessels in the area, which Lloyd's of London had threatened to increase, remained stable. The message to global commerce was unmistakable. American naval power remained the guarantor of free passage. Militarily, the lessons were stark. China's investment in stealth technology, estimated at over $20 billion across the J-20 program, had been countered by American electronic warfare and networked battle management. The J-20's reduced radar cross-section meant nothing when American jamming prevented Chinese pilots from using their own sensors effectively. The battle proved that stealth alone doesn't win fights. Situational awareness, coordination, training, and the ability to operate in a degraded electronic environment matter just as much. American pilots trained for these scenarios constantly. Chinese pilots, despite their advanced aircraft, had not. Intelligence recovered in the days following the engagement revealed the depth of China's failure. Intercepted communications showed that Chinese ground controllers had lost contact with their aircraft within minutes of the jamming starting. Backup communication protocols failed. Pilots reverted to visual signals, a nearly useless tactic at 45,000 feet and distances of 20 miles. One pilot's post-mission debriefing, leaked to Western intelligence, described the experience as flying blind into a storm with no instruments. The technological superiority China believed it had achieved evaporated the moment American electronic warfare systems activated. For Taiwan, the outcome was both relief and validation. President Lai Ching-te, in a carefully worded statement, thanked the United States for upholding international law and ensuring the safety of one of the world's most critical waterways. He stopped short of declaring victory. But the subtext was clear. As long as America remained committed to freedom of navigation, Taiwan's de facto independence had a powerful shield. Beijing's attempt to intimidate had instead strengthened Taipei's resolve. For the United States, October 8th became a case study in modern naval warfare. The engagement demonstrated the value of carrier strike groups, the effectiveness of layered defense systems, and the decisive advantage of superior training and coordination. Within a week, the footage of the engagement, captured by reconnaissance drones and shared with allied nations, was being analyzed in war colleges from Annapolis to Tokyo. The consensus was unanimous. This was not a close call. This was a demonstration of overwhelming tactical superiority. But the strategic implications reached even further. Japan, South Korea, and Australia, all of whom maintain complex defense relationships with the United States, took note. If 50 of China's most advanced fighters could be defeated so decisively, Beijing's broader military ambitions in the Pacific were suddenly less intimidating. In Tokyo, defense planners accelerated discussions about increased military spending. In Seoul, debates about enhancing cooperation with American forces gained momentum. In Canberra, calls to expand Australia's naval capabilities found new urgency. The battle had shifted the psychological balance of power across the entire Indo-Pacific region. China's response was predictable but telling. State media initially denied any losses, claiming the mission had been a routine patrol that achieved all objectives. When satellite images of the wreckage proved otherwise, the narrative shifted. The engagement was described as a limited probing action, not a full confrontation. When that failed to hold, Beijing blamed mechanical failures and weather conditions, anything but the reality of tactical defeat. But the silence from Chinese military leadership spoke louder than any propaganda. No awards were given, no pilots were celebrated. The J-20 program, once hailed as a game-changer, faced renewed scrutiny and rumored budget cuts. For the families of the 7 Chinese pilots killed, the loss was personal and devastating. But their sacrifice exposed a truth Beijing couldn't suppress. Advanced weapons are only as effective as the doctrine, training, and strategy behind them. On October 8th, American forces demonstrated that they possessed all three in overwhelming measure. The USS Gerald R continued its transit, a floating symbol of American resolve. The Taiwan Strait remained open. International law held. And the world was reminded that dominance at sea is not claimed by boasts or numbers, but earned through capability, discipline, and the will to defend freedom. As the sun set on the Taiwan Strait that evening, the balance of power in the Pacific remained unchanged. Not because conflict was avoided, but because it was decisively won. The lesson for any adversary was written in fire and steel across the sky that morning. Challenge American naval power, and you will not force a retreat. You will face a response measured, overwhelming, and unforgiving. The oceans remember what happened on October 8th. They remember that 50 fighters came to intimidate, and only 41 returned home. Now I want to hear from you. First, do you believe this engagement represents a turning point in U.S.-China relations? Or was it an isolated incident? Second, what single piece of technology or tactic was most critical to the American victory? Third, what future scenarios in the Pacific do you want us to analyze next? Leave your answers in the comments below. Your engagement shapes everything we cover on this channel. And if you made it to the end of this deep dive, you're exactly the kind of viewer we create this content for. Show your support by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and remember that freedom of navigation is never negotiated. It's defended.